Bob Hertzberg, well known to many in this room, a partner at Mayor Brown here in Los Angeles, also chairman and co-founder of G24 Innovations, which manufactures a new type of lightweight and flexible solar cell, which to me means he's going to get really rich. He is an active entrepreneur and leader in global policy on renewable energy solutions. Previously served as a California State Assemblyman representing the 40th District from 1996 to 2002, and was Speaker of the California State Assembly from 2000 to 2002. Bob is a founding member of the Leadership Council of the Public Policy Institute of California, currently serves on the Board of Counselors for the USC School of Policy, Planning and Development, a graduate of the Redlands JD from UC Hastings, and as Speaker established at least one commission on the California initiative process. Dan Schnur, next to him, Director of the Jesse M. Unruh Institute of Politics at the University of Southern California, where he works to motivate students to become active in the world of politics and encourage public officials to participate in the daily life of USC. Obviously, he gets out to help the other universities in the community for years. Dan was one of California's leading political and media strategists, which includes a record on 4 presidential and 3 gubernatorial campaigns. Dan served as the National Director of Communications for the 2000 presidential campaign of U.S. Senator John McCain, and spent 5 years as Chief Media Spokesman for California Governor Pete Wilson. Dan began his political career in the press office of the Reagan-Bush '84 presidential campaign, later served as spokesman for Bush-Quayle '88, and worked in the press office of the Republican National Committee before moving to California in 1990 to take on the position of Communications Director of the state Republican Party. Finally, at the end of the table, alphabetically of course, Carmen Trutanich, elected City Attorney for the City of Los Angeles just this past May. Carmen, born and raised in San Pedro, attended local schools, earned an undergraduate degree and MBA at USC. Upon completing his law degree, joined the LA District Attorney's Office, where he cut his teeth in the hardcore gang division before playing an instrumental role in the formation and success of the Environmental Crimes Division at the District Attorney's Office. He left the DA's office in 1988 to work in private practice. In '88, he formed Trutanich, Michael, where he continued to focus on environmental litigation. He has been lead trial counsel in more than 300 trials, including more than 100 jury trials. Named a Southern California super lawyer for the past 4 years in a row, Carmen Trutanich, our city attorney. Bob, given your experience in the state legislature directly with the California initiative process, I'd like to start our discussion with you, and the rest of the panelists can chime in at any time. I'll move the subjects along when I think we should do that. I want to start with you, Bob, because there, with some very controversial initiatives that have recently been on the ballot, some passing, some not, with a very potentially controversial initiative that may be on the ballot in November with the legalization of marijuana. Could you just give us a brief overview of where you think, given your experience, there is room for improvement or change in the California initiative process?
Thank you. If I can just supplement my resume with one very important factor, I serve with distinction on the board of directors of the Pepperdine School of Public Policy. That's all I got to say. Look, you know, it's very hard. The commission on which Joel served, that we put together, we looked at first of all, these initiatives came out of this unbelievable grip of power that the railroads had at the turn of the century on on California. And we are in a very similar situation where a handful of people have a pretty unruly grip on what happens in Sacramento. I got to witness it firsthand and feel the pain. And so the real notion, if I can start with, is it's about ultimately people in California, the statement of, we're not going to give up the power. We want to have the veto right. They don't want to vote on every single initiative, and I think people have ballot fatigue as a result of these last number of years, but there's a deep sentiment. When I was fortunate enough to serve in the legislature, we had a 54% approval rating. I don't think it's past single digits now. And even then, we looked at some suggestions of how to improve the system. It was very difficult because people didn't want to give up their power. So, and now in particular, any kinds of change are very difficult. But there are some, I think, coming out of the commission, others can add to this, I can open on this, kind of sensible things, one of which we're considering now through California Forward. And that is a pay-go system. The problem with the state government is we don't have a nexus, a connection between where the money's coming from and the imagination we have of where we're going to spend it. The notion is that if you're going to spend money, you better show where it's going to come from. Everybody, if you have a wish list and you don't have to think about how you're going to pay for it, it's easy to pass it. And so the notion would be to have a pay-go system that would apply both to all of the acts of the legislature and the governor on the one hand, and also apply to any initiative. Where is the money coming from? It seems that there's some relative support for that. Two, how do you deal with, my personal front is this whole signature gathering process where you pay people to get signatures and you write a check for $a few million and you're on the ballot. It's a little ridiculous, but the lawyers tell us that constitutionally you can't stop that from happening. So can you do something that's an interim step, and I'll just stop here to let others intercede. And this is really what the commission grappled with some years ago, and we had this. It was called the indirect initiative. Can you have a lower threshold of vote signatures it takes to get on the ballot, and then let the government process intercede and determine its constitution? One of the great challenges with Prop 187, whether you were for it or against it, was it wasn't about the issue. It was, let's send a message, and then everybody was upset when it was overturned. Or lots of these initiatives get put in the ballot by folks and they haven't been properly vetted. How do you create that balance in the process and this notion? What used to be in California, we limited it, and Joel at the commission recommended we bring it back, was a lower threshold of signature gathering to put something on the ballot. From there it goes to the legislature. The legislature can look at it, make changes to it, and then it goes back to the proponents. And the proponents then can choose to accept or reject. If they reject it, they go forward with the lower threshold. If they accept it, then it can go onto the ballot with the fixes and changes in the process. That would be a rational way to create some balance in the process and still live within the constitutional confines of what, fundraising and all these signature gathering things that limit our ability to really affect the system and still give power to people to make change.
Joel, you hear Bob talk about the signature gathering and the money that comes in. The outside influence in the state is something that is criticized. I frequently do it, especially when you look at the source of some of the funds. Is there any way, or is it just something, is the outside influence just something that we're going to have to live with, and disclosure is the best way to go?
I think disclosure is the best way to go because, as Bob has mentioned, the Supreme Court has said in various iterations that you can't deny, for shorthand, money is speech, although I know there are different ways to define it. So the money is going to be there. Money in politics, money is the mother's milk of politics, as Jesse Unruh once said, and it's going to be there. So I think disclosure is important. But there's one thing I'd like to try here, opening bid on why the initiative process is so strong for interest groups and why they support it. Because it makes decisions. While the legislature, as Bob mentioned, argues and doesn't quite move forward, sometimes goes backwards, the initiative process makes firm decisions. And here's how I want to address this. Real short, I don't know how many people in the room